Behind the colorful bus and catchy songs, the Partridge Family harbored some truly bizarre secrets that would shock even their most devoted fans. From naked magazine covers that destroyed careers to child actors so difficult the entire cast complained, the wholesome TV family had a dark side filled with abuse, eating disorders, and mysterious disappearances. These weren't your typical sitcom shenanigans. They were shocking realities that contradicted everything viewers thought they knew about television's most musical family. Here are 15 weird facts about the Partridge Family, 1970, you never knew. Fact 1. David Cassidy destroyed his career with a naked Rolling Stone cover. By 1972, David Cassidy found himself trapped in a bubblegum image that was making him millions but driving him crazy. The 22-year-old heartthrob was selling out massive venues like the Houston Astrodome to 56,000 screaming fans, yet he felt completely stifled by his squeaky clean Keith Partridge persona. Desperate to break free from his teeny bopper image and prove he was a serious artist, Cassidy made a decision that would forever change his career in ways he never expected. Rolling Stone magazine offered him the perfect opportunity to reinvent himself, and Cassidy jumped at the chance without telling his management team. He agreed to pose for legendary photographer Annie Leibovitz in what would become one of the most controversial celebrity photo shoots of the decade. The resulting cover image showed Cassidy lying completely nude on grass, with just enough strategic positioning to avoid showing everything, accompanied by the provocative headline, "Naked Lunchbox." The magazine hit newsstands in May of 1972, and the reaction was immediate and explosive. Cassidy's core fan base of young girls and their parents were absolutely shocked to see their wholesome idol in such a revealing pose. The accompanying article made things even worse, describing Cassidy as getting stoned and drunk while riding around New York City, completely contradicting his clean-cut image. The commercial fallout was swift and devastating. Coca-Cola immediately pulled their lucrative endorsement deal with Cassidy, and other major sponsors quickly followed suit. His mother, Evelyn Ward, was so overwhelmed by the negative press attention that she fled to Mexico to escape the media circus. The photo shoot accomplished exactly what Cassidy had hoped for in terms of changing his image, but the financial and professional consequences were far more severe than he had anticipated. Even decades later, Cassidy admitted that the Rolling Stone cover became the largest selling issue of the magazine at that time, until John Lennon's death. While the photo shoot successfully destroyed his bubblegum career, it also marked the beginning of years of struggle to establish himself as a serious performer outside of the Partridge Family's shadow. Fact 2. The show was based on a real family's tragic story. The cheerful, harmonious Partridge Family that audiences fell in love with was actually inspired by a real musical family whose story was far darker and more tragic than anything viewers could have imagined. The Cowsills were a genuine family band from Newport, Rhode Island, who achieved major success in the late 1960s with hits like The Rain, The Park and Other Things, and their cover of Hair from the Broadway musical. When television executives visited the Cowsills at their home in Santa Monica, they were charmed by the idea of a musical family and decided to create a TV show based on their concept. However, the producers quickly realized they couldn't use the actual Cowsills because the children were not trained actors and were too old for the roles as written in the script. Instead, they created the fictional Partridge Family, but the real-life inspiration remained largely hidden from the public. Behind the scenes, the Cowsills were living through a nightmare that contrasted sharply with the wholesome image portrayed on the Partridge Family. William Bud Cowsill, the family patriarch and manager, was a former Navy recruiter who ran his household like a military operation. His children later described him as physically and emotionally abusive, using his Navy discipline methods on his own family in ways that left them terrified and resentful. The situation reached a breaking point during the group's residency at the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas in February of 1970. Bud became enraged with his eldest son, Bill, who was the group's lead singer and main creative force, over Bill's friendship with musician Waddy Wachtel, whom Bud disapproved of. The confrontation escalated into a physical fight in a hotel bar, which resulted in Bud being arrested for assault and spending a night in jail. After this incident, Bud fired Bill from the band that Bill had helped create, effectively destroying the group's most important asset. The Cowsills never recovered from losing their lead singer, and their career quickly spiraled downward. The tragic irony is that while the Partridge Family portrayed an idealized version of family harmony and musical success, The real family that inspired it was falling apart due to abuse and dysfunction. Fact 3. Jeremy Gelbwaks was fired for being completely unmanageable. When the Partridge Family premiered in 1970, 10-year-old Jeremy Gelbwaks was cast as Chris Partridge, the youngest son who played drums in the family band. However, what seemed like a dream role for any child actor quickly turned into a nightmare for everyone involved in the production, as Gelbwaks proved to be one of the most difficult child actors anyone on set had ever encountered. According to David Cassidy, who worked closely with Gelbwaks throughout the first season, the young actor had personality conflicts with literally every single person in the cast and with the producers as well. Gelbwaks was particularly problematic when working with Cassidy and Danny Bonaduce, creating tension that made filming scenes extremely challenging for everyone involved. The situation became so bad that cast members, crew workers, and producers all began complaining about his behavior on a regular basis. The problems weren't limited to just personality clashes either. Gelbwaks struggled with basic aspects of the job that other child actors typically managed without issue. He had tremendous difficulty remembering his lines, which led to excessive retakes that frustrated the entire production team. In one particularly memorable incident, he required 36 takes to complete a relatively simple scene that should have been finished in just a few attempts. His inability to keep time while pretending to play drums was also glaringly obvious during musical performances, making it clear he had no musical experience whatsoever. Perhaps most telling was how the producers handled his departure. The official story given to the public was that Gelbwaks' family had moved away from Los Angeles due to his father's job transfer, making it impossible for him to continue with the show. In reality, everyone involved was eager to see him go, and the producers actively encouraged the family to accept the job transfer opportunity. When Brian Forster was brought in to replace Gelbwaks for the second season, the transition was seamless. The most shocking aspect of this entire situation was the complete lack of fan reaction to the replacement. Despite the fact that Chris Partridge's appearance changed dramatically between seasons, not a single viewer wrote to the studio to complain about the switch or ask what had happened to the original actor. Fact 4. Susan Day's skin turned orange from her extreme diet. Susan Day's rise to fame as Lori Partridge brought her national attention and countless magazine covers, but the pressure of being in the spotlight as a teenager led to a dangerous obsession with staying thin that had bizarre and visible consequences. When the Partridge Family became a hit, Day found herself constantly scrutinized for her appearance, with photographers and magazine editors regularly commenting on her body and weight, which created an overwhelming pressure to maintain what the industry considered the perfect figure. Day became increasingly determined to stay as thin as possible, and her methods became more and more extreme with each passing season. During one particularly intense period, she decided to eat nothing but carrots for an entire filming season, believing this would help her maintain the ultra-slim appearance that she thought was expected of her as a young actress on television. The carrot-only diet had immediate and dramatic effects on both her weight and her physical appearance. Her weight dropped to a dangerously low 92 pounds, which was alarming for someone of her height and age. But the most shocking change was something that nobody on the production team had anticipated. The excessive consumption of carrots caused her skin to develop a distinctly orange tint due to a condition called carotenemia, which happens when too much beta-carotene builds up in the body from eating large amounts of orange vegetables. The orange discoloration was noticeable enough that other cast members and crew workers began to worry about her health, but it wasn't until Danny Bonaduce made a particularly blunt comment that Day realized how serious her situation had become.
When Bonaduce saw her in a bikini during filming, he callously told her that she looked disgusting, which served as a harsh wake-up call about how dramatically her appearance had changed.
This incident finally made Day understand that her extreme dieting had gone too far and was actually making her look worse rather than better. Years later, she would openly discuss her struggles with anorexia and body image issues during her time on the Partridge Family, acknowledging that the pressure to maintain a certain appearance had led her to develop seriously unhealthy eating habits. Fact 5. The iconic bus ended up as junk behind a taco stand. The colorfully painted Partridge Family bus was arguably as famous as any of the show's human stars, instantly recognizable with its psychedelic design that captured the spirit of the early 1970s. The 1957 Chevrolet Series 6800 Superior school bus had been purchased by Screen Gems from an Orange County school district for just $500, then transformed into the iconic vehicle that would transport the fictional family to gigs across the country for 4 seasons of television. When the Partridge Family ended its run in March of 1974, the fate of the beloved bus became surprisingly mundane and eventually quite sad. The studio initially repainted the bus white and used it for another television show called Apple's Way, which was filmed on the same lot but only lasted for 1 season during 1974 and 75. After that brief second career, the bus was essentially abandoned and left to find its own way in the world. For more than a decade, the once famous vehicle sat deteriorating in the back parking lot of Lucy's Tacos, a small restaurant located on Martin Luther King Boulevard near the University of Southern California campus. During those years, the bus became a curious landmark for locals who would occasionally spot it while getting food, though most people probably had no idea they were looking at a piece of television history. The colorful paint job that had once made it so distinctive slowly faded under the California sun, and vandals gradually damaged the windows and other parts of the exterior. The bus's inglorious end came in February of 1987, when Lucy's Tacos decided to repave their parking lot. Rather than trying to preserve what had once been an icon of American television, the restaurant simply had the deteriorated bus towed away to a junkyard. By that time, the vehicle was in terrible condition, with broken windows, flat tires, and most of the identifying features like the family name and the "Caution Nervous Mother" driving sign painted over or completely faded away. The bus that had once symbolized family togetherness and musical dreams ended up as scrap metal, marking a rather undignified conclusion to one of television's most recognizable vehicles. Fact 6, professional studio singers secretly sang for the family. While millions of viewers watched the Partridge Family perform their hit songs on television each week, the voices they were hearing on the actual records were largely not coming from the actors at all, but from a group of highly skilled professional studio singers who remained completely anonymous to the public. The Ron Hicklin singers were the secret voices behind most of the Partridge Family's musical success, serving as the vocal equivalent of the famous Wrecking Crew, the legendary group of session musicians who played on countless hit records during the 1960s and 70s. The core group of singers included Ron Hicklin himself, along with brothers John and Tom Baller, Jackie Ward, Sally Stevens, and Gene Morford, all of whom were among the most sought-after session vocalists in Los Angeles during that era. These professional singers had already provided vocals for major recording artists, television themes, movie soundtracks, and countless commercial jingles before they were brought in to create the distinctive Partridge Family sound that would top the charts and sell millions of albums. Only David Cassidy and Shirley Jones actually sang their own parts on the Partridge Family recordings, while the rest of the cast members simply pretended to sing during filming and performances. The Ron Hicklin singers provided all of the background vocals and harmony parts that gave the songs their rich, polished sound, and they even sang lead vocals on some tracks that didn't feature Cassidy at all. 2 songs on the first album, called "I'm on the Road" and "I Really Want to Know You," were performed entirely by the studio singers without any involvement from the television cast. The irony of this arrangement was that these anonymous studio professionals were largely responsible for creating one of the most successful pop music phenomena of the early 70s, yet they received no public credit or recognition for their work. Ron Hicklin later said that working on the Partridge Family was just another job to him, even though their debut hit song sold 5 million copies and knocked the Beatles off the top of the Billboard charts. The show's musical success was built on the talents of singers that most fans never knew existed. Fact 7. Jack Cassidy's jealousy nearly destroyed the show. The success of the Partridge Family created unexpected tension within the real Cassidy family, as David's father, Jack Cassidy, struggled with intense jealousy over his wife and son's sudden rise to fame and fortune. Jack Cassidy had been a successful stage and film actor in his own right before the Partridge Family began, but when the show launched in 1970, he found himself watching from the sidelines as Shirley Jones and David became household names while his own career seemed to fade into the background. Jack's resentment grew particularly intense regarding the close working relationship between his wife Shirley and his son David, who spent long hours together on set and shared the spotlight in ways that made Jack feel excluded and forgotten. The situation became even more complicated because Jack had originally appeared in the unaired pilot episode as Shirley's boyfriend, but the producers had decided to go in a different direction and removed his character entirely. which only added to his feelings of rejection and bitterness. As the Partridge Family became more successful during the early 1970s, Jack's behavior became increasingly erratic and concerning to those around him. His drinking problem worsened significantly, and he began displaying signs of mental illness that manifested in bizarre and unpredictable ways. Neighbors reported seeing him watering his lawn completely naked, apparently unconcerned about who might be watching or what they might think of his behavior. Even more troubling were reports that Jack had begun referring to himself as Jesus Christ during conversations, suggesting that his mental state was deteriorating along with his relationships with his family members. David later described how his father's anger and alcohol abuse created a tense atmosphere that affected everyone in the household, and the relationship between father and son remained strained throughout David's time on the show. The family situation became so difficult that Shirley Jones eventually filed for divorce from Jack in 1975, ending their marriage after nearly 2 decades together. Jack's life continued to spiral downward after the divorce, and he died in a tragic apartment fire in Los Angeles in 1976, which was caused by one of his own cigarettes and left him so badly burned that he could only be identified by a unique ring he was wearing. Fact 8. Danny Bonaduce started drinking at cast parties as a child. Danny Bonaduce's childhood was marked by serious problems at home that his fellow cast members couldn't help but notice, leading to an unusual living arrangement that inadvertently introduced him to alcohol at a very young age. Bonaduce's father was physically and emotionally abusive, creating such a toxic environment that the other actors and crew members on the Partridge Family became genuinely concerned about the young performer's well-being and safety when he wasn't on set. Dave Madden, who played the family's manager Reuben Kincaid on the show, stepped in to help by offering Bonaduce a place to stay whenever he needed to escape his troubled home life. This act of kindness provided Bonaduce with a safe haven and gave him the stability he desperately needed during the demanding years of filming the series. Madden's generosity and concern for his young co-star created a surrogate family relationship that Bonaduce would remember fondly for the rest of his life. However, living with Madden also exposed Bonaduce to adult social situations that he probably wasn't ready to handle at such a young age. Madden was known for hosting regular parties at his home, where cast members, crew workers, and other entertainment industry professionals would gather to socialize and unwind after long days of filming. These gatherings were typical Hollywood parties with adult beverages freely available for the guests who attended. During these parties, Bonaduce developed a habit of sneaking drinks when the adults weren't paying attention to him, moving around the room, and quietly taking sips from glasses that guests had left unattended. Since he was still a child and underage, none of the party guests expected him to be drinking alcohol, which made it relatively easy for him to consume liquor without anyone noticing what he was doing. Bonaduce later recalled these experiences as part of a pattern that would lead to serious substance abuse problems throughout his life. The combination of his traumatic home situation and early exposure to alcohol at industry parties contributed to addiction issues that would plague him well into adulthood, eventually leading to periods of homelessness and multiple attempts at rehabilitation as he struggled to overcome the problems that had started during his childhood years on the Partridge Family. Fact 9. The family dog mysteriously vanished without explanation. During the first season of the Partridge Family, viewers became accustomed to seeing a fluffy family dog named Simone, who appeared regularly in episodes as part of the household, adding to the wholesome family atmosphere that the show was trying to create. Simone was featured prominently enough that fans of the show would have naturally expected her to remain a consistent part of the Partridge Family dynamic throughout the series, much like family pets on other popular sitcoms of the era who became beloved recurring characters. However, when the second season premiered in 1971, sharp-eyed viewers might have noticed that something was missing from the Partridge household, though the absence was so subtle that many people probably didn't consciously realize what had changed. Simone had completely disappeared from the show without any explanation whatsoever. And what made this disappearance even more strange was that none of the characters ever mentioned what had happened to their beloved pet. Unlike other television shows that would typically address the departure of a regular character or family member with some kind of storyline explanation, the Partridge Family simply acted as if Simone had never existed in the first place. There was no episode where the family sadly said goodbye to their dog, no mention of Simone running away or being given to relatives, and no acknowledgement that the family had ever owned a pet at all during the previous season. This mysterious vanishing act was particularly unusual for a family sitcom. where writers typically try to maintain continuity and explain changes that viewers might notice from season to season. The show's creators apparently decided that Simone was no longer necessary for the stories they wanted to tell, but rather than creating a proper exit for the character, they simply chose to pretend that the dog had never been part of the family dynamic. The producers never provided any official explanation for why Simone was written out of the show, leaving fans to speculate about whether there were problems with the animal actor, budget concerns, or simply a creative decision that pets were too complicated to include in the show's format. Whatever the reason, Simone joined the ranks of television characters who simply disappeared into thin air, never to be seen or mentioned again. Fact 10. Shirley Jones turned down being Carol Brady. Before Shirley Jones became the musical matriarch of the Partridge Family, she was actually offered the chance to play another iconic television mother on a different show that would become equally famous, but she made a career decision based on her desire to avoid being typecast in a traditional housewife role. In 1970, when both the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family were being developed for the fall television season, Jones was approached by producers to play Carol Brady, the mother of 6 children in what would become one of the most beloved family sitcoms in television history. Jones had already established herself as a serious actress with an impressive background in musical theater and films, having won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her role in Elmer Gantry and starring in major Hollywood musicals like Oklahoma and Carousel. With this distinguished career behind her, she was looking for television opportunities that would allow her to use her musical talents and avoid the stereotypical domestic roles that were often offered to actresses of her generation. When Jones read the script for the Brady Bunch and considered what her role would involve, she realized that Carol Brady would spend most of her screen time engaged in typical housewife activities that didn't appeal to her as a performer. She specifically mentioned that she didn't want to spend all of her scenes in the kitchen making sandwiches for the children, which seemed to be a large part of what the Carol Brady character would be doing throughout the series. The role of Shirley Partridge, on the other hand, offered Jones something much more interesting and challenging as an actress. Instead of being confined to domestic duties, Shirley Partridge would be the lead singer of a family band, allowing Jones to showcase her musical abilities while also playing a mother who was actively pursuing a career and following her dreams alongside her children. Jones made the decision to turn down the Brady Bunch and accept the Partridge Family instead, a choice that allowed her to combine her maternal television persona with her musical background in a way that felt more fulfilling and less limiting than the traditional sitcom mother role would have been. Fact 11. The show used Bewitched's exact same house location. Television viewers with sharp eyes and good memories might have experienced a strange sense of deja vu when watching the Partridge Family, especially if they were also fans of the popular supernatural sitcom Bewitched that had been running since 1964. The house that served as the Partridge Family home was actually the exact same location that had been used for several years as the residence of Gladys and Abner Kravitz, the nosy neighbors who lived next door to Samantha and Darren Stevens on Bewitched. This shared location was part of a common practice in Hollywood during the 1960s and 70s, where television studios would reuse the same exterior shots and house facades for multiple shows to save money on production costs. The residential block where the house was located had become a popular filming spot that appeared in numerous television series over the years, including I Dream of Jeannie, Dennis the Menace, and The Donna Reed Show, making it one of the most frequently filmed neighborhoods in television history. The house at 1164 Morning Glory Circle had served as the Kravitz residence throughout most of Bewitched's run, and viewers of that show would have been very familiar with its distinctive architectural features and the characteristic yard divider fence that separated it from the Stevens family property. When the Partridge Family began filming in 1970, the producers simply adopted this same house as the home where Shirley Partridge and her 5 children lived and practiced their music. What made this situation particularly noticeable for eagle-eyed viewers was that both shows were still airing during the same time period, which meant that fans could potentially see the same house on 2 different television programs within the same week. Some episodes of The Partridge Family even featured scenes where the famous colorful bus would drive past the house, and in these shots, viewers could clearly see elements that they would recognize from Bewitched, including the distinctive fence and architectural details. The house would later gain even more recognition when it appeared in the 1998 movie Pleasantville starring Reese Witherspoon, proving that this particular location had remarkable staying power in Hollywood productions across multiple decades of filming. Fact 12. A 4-year-old cast member was dropped mid-season. When the Partridge Family entered its 4th and final season in 1973, the producers decided to add a new character in what appeared to be a desperate attempt to inject fresh energy into a show that was beginning to show signs of declining popularity. 4-year-old Ricky Segal was cast as Ricky Stevens, an adorable neighbor child who would live next door to the Partridge Family and become a regular part of their household activities and musical performances. The decision to add such a young character followed a common television trend of the era, where struggling shows would introduce cute children to appeal to family audiences and hopefully boost sagging ratings. Ricky was given a prominent role in the show's format, with each episode featuring a segment where he would perform a specially written children's song, usually accompanied by the rest of the Partridge Family, who would sit around and beam at him with exaggerated expressions of delight and admiration. However, what seemed like a good idea in theory quickly proved to be problematic in practice, as Ricky's musical performances had the opposite effect of what the producers had intended. Instead of charming audiences, his cloying children's songs brought many episodes to a screeching halt, interrupting the flow of the stories and testing the patience of viewers who had tuned in to see the Partridge Family's adventures rather than watch a preschooler perform nursery rhyme-style numbers. The character's songs were so saccharine and his performances so overly precious that they became genuinely annoying to many fans of the show, creating a situation where what was supposed to be the cute highlight of each episode instead became the most tedious part of the viewing experience. Even the adult cast members seemed to struggle with having to sit through these musical interludes, though they maintained their professional smiles throughout the filming process. Recognizing that the experiment was not working as planned, the show's writers and producers quietly began reducing Ricky's role as the season progressed, eventually writing him out of the show entirely by mid-season without any explanation or farewell storyline. His departure was handled so subtly that many viewers probably didn't even notice that the annoying neighbor child had simply stopped appearing in episodes. Fact 13. The theme song has secret lyrics about helping mom pay bills. Most viewers of the Partridge Family became familiar with the upbeat theme song that opened each episode, but what they didn't know was that the show originally had a completely different opening song with lyrics that revealed a much more practical and less romantic motivation behind the family's musical career. The theme song that audiences came to know and love was called "Come On, Get Happy," but the original version that was written for the early episodes was titled "When We're Singin'" and contained lyrics that told a very different story about why the Partridge Family decided to become professional musicians. The original theme song was much more direct about the family's financial situation and their need to find a way to support themselves after the death of the father. Instead of focusing on the joy of making music together or the excitement of traveling around the country, the lyrics of "When We're Singin'" explicitly mentioned that the children recognized their mother was struggling financially and believed that their musical talents could provide a solution to their money problems. One particularly revealing line in the original version stated that the family knew they could help their mother if their music would pay, making it clear that the decision to form a band was driven primarily by economic necessity rather than pure artistic passion. This lyrical content painted a much more realistic picture of a single mother trying to make ends meet with 5 children to support, which was probably closer to the actual experience of many families watching the show at home. However, the producers apparently decided that this more honest approach to the family's motivations was too serious or potentially depressing for the lighthearted tone they wanted to establish for the series. The original theme was replaced with "Come On, Get Happy," which focused on the positive aspects of making music together and spreading joy through their performances, completely eliminating any reference to financial struggles or practical concerns. The change from "When We're Singin'" to "Come On, Get Happy" represented a deliberate shift toward a more idealized version of family life, where musical success was portrayed as something that happened naturally through talent and enthusiasm, rather than as a calculated response to economic pressure and the need to pay household bills. Fact 14. David Cassidy was paid only $600 weekly despite stadium sellouts. One of the most shocking examples of exploitation in entertainment history occurred during the height of David Cassidy's fame, when he was simultaneously one of the biggest pop stars in the world and one of the most underpaid performers in the music industry. While Cassidy was selling out massive venues like the Houston Astrodome to crowds of 56,000 screaming fans and generating millions of dollars in ticket sales, merchandise, and record profits, he was earning just $600 per week from his contract with Screen Gems for his work on The Partridge Family. This enormous disparity between his earning power and his actual income was the result of an unfair contract that Cassidy had signed when he was still a minor, before anyone could have predicted the massive success that the Partridge Family would achieve. The entertainment industry during the early 1970s was notorious for taking advantage of young performers who lacked the experience and legal representation necessary to negotiate fair deals, and Cassidy's situation became one of the most extreme examples of this practice. The injustice of his financial arrangement became even more apparent when considering the scale of his popularity and commercial success during the peak years of the Partridge Family. Cassidy's concerts were selling out within hours of tickets going on sale, his fan club was larger than those of the Beatles or Elvis Presley, and products featuring his image were generating enormous profits for the companies that held the licensing rights to his likeness and name. Despite contractual provisions that supposedly entitled Cassidy to 15% of merchandising profits, he received only $5,000 total from the countless lunchboxes, posters, magazines, and other items that featured his face and were sold to his devoted fan base. The studio was making millions from his popularity while paying him a salary that was embarrassingly small compared to the revenue he was generating for everyone else involved in the business. Fortunately, Cassidy's manager eventually discovered that the original contract was invalid because he had been underage when he signed it, which allowed them to renegotiate the terms and secure a much more reasonable arrangement that increased his weekly pay to $4,000 and gave him a rare 4-year contract term with significantly better provisions. Fact 15. The pilot featured Jack Cassidy as Shirley's boyfriend. Before The Partridge Family became the beloved television series that audiences came to know, there was an entirely different version of the show that was filmed but never aired, featuring a completely different family dynamic that would have changed the entire tone and structure of the series. The original pilot episode was filmed in December of 1969 and contained several major differences from the version that eventually made it to television, including the presence of Jack Cassidy, who was Shirley Jones's real-life husband and David Cassidy's father. In this unaired pilot, the mother character was not named Shirley Partridge, as she would be in the final version, but was instead called Connie, and rather than being a widowed single mother raising 5 children on her own, she had a romantic relationship with a boyfriend who appeared regularly in the storyline. This boyfriend character was played by Jack Cassidy, which would have created the unusual situation of having a real-life married couple playing romantic partners on screen while their actual son David played one of the children in the family. The inclusion of Jack Cassidy's character would have fundamentally altered the show's premise and emotional core, since much of the Partridge Family's appeal came from the idea of a strong single mother successfully managing both a household and a music career while raising her children without a father figure present. Having a boyfriend character would have shifted the focus away from Shirley's independence and capability as a single parent, potentially making the show less groundbreaking in its portrayal of women managing careers and families. The original pilot also featured other significant differences from the broadcast version, including a different family address and the setting being changed from California to Ohio, which would have given the show a completely different geographical and cultural context. Additionally, there were references to the late father that were more specific and detailed than what appeared in the final version of the show. For reasons that were never fully explained publicly, the network and producers decided to completely rework the concept before the show went to air, eliminating Jack Cassidy's character entirely and transforming Connie into the widowed Shirley Partridge that viewers would come to love, creating a much simpler and more focused family structure for the series.